Welcome! In this video, we're going to hear about 3 chilling encounters with the paranormal. If you want to hear about more stories like these, then give this video a like and make sure to subscribe. This first story comes from someone who experienced a night they will never forget. With that being said, let's get started. I'm not the type to believe in the paranormal. Ghost stories, hauntings, it's fun for movies and all, but I've always been a skeptic. That changed one night. I don't remember how I even processed what happened, but I need to get it out. This was about 10 years ago when I lived alone in a small apartment, a one-bedroom in an older building. I'd already been there for about a year, and while the place had its quirks, nothing ever felt off before. Until that one night. It started around 2 a.m. I'd fallen asleep on the couch watching TV and woke up to this loud bang that sounded like it came from the kitchen. It didn't sound like a pot falling or something slipping off the counter. It sounded more like a cabinet door getting slammed shut with full force. I sat up and just listened. At first, I thought maybe it was the upstairs neighbor, but then it happened again, and this time there was no mistaking it. It came from the kitchen. Honestly, it sounded like someone was in there helping themselves to my food. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find that I can use as a weapon, or at least a diversion if it came to that, and started creeping towards the kitchen. I flipped the light on, but no one was there. The cabinets were all closed. There was nothing on the floor that could have dropped there, and there was nothing out of place, except for one chair that was facing the opposite direction, towards the hallway. Now, like I said, I lived alone, and I know I didn't leave it that way. I tried to forget about it and went back into the living room and shut the TV off. As soon as I started walking to my room, I heard it again. I froze in place, and even though I didn't want to know, I forced myself to turn around to go back into the kitchen. When I did, that same chair was now in the living room with me, sitting just outside the kitchen door. I backed up, grabbed my keys, and left the apartment. I sat in my car for what felt like forever, trying to calm down. I have never seen or felt anything like this, so this was a complete first for me. When I finally worked up the nerve to go back inside, everything was quiet. The chair was still in the same spot though, but nothing else was out of place. I went around the whole apartment, checking it over. Every space, every closet, under the bed even. I found nothing. I barely slept that night. Today, everything seems normal. The only difference is now I can't shake the feeling that something is off with the atmosphere. It feels heavier. I sometimes feel like I'm being watched. Sometimes I hear faint noises, like soft knocks or creaks that weren't there before. I don't know what to think. I keep telling myself there's a logical explanation, but I lived there long enough to know what was normal and what wasn't. I have since moved and no longer feel that presence, and hopefully I never do again. The next story deals with someone who during a snowstorm back in 2023 experienced the beginning of a haunting that solidified their beliefs in the paranormal. This is their night of terror retold. This happened during a snowstorm last January of 2023. I lived alone in a small rental house in a small town in Minnesota. It's usually peaceful, but that night it felt anything but. It started out small. I was sitting on the couch binge watching The Office and listening to the wind howl outside. Out of the blue, I heard a sound coming from my bedroom. I thought maybe it was my cat that knocked something down, but then I realized that I'd been locked in cat jail for about an hour now, so it couldn't have been her. I put her aside and walked into the bedroom and flipped the light on. There was nothing out of place, but then I noticed that the bathroom faucet was on. I stood there with a puzzled look on my face because, what the fuck? I walked into the bathroom and shut it off, but when I turned to leave, the damn thing turned right back on and the lights started flickering. I forgot to mention that I didn't turn the light on in the bathroom, because there was enough light coming in from the bedroom and I didn't need to. So, imagine how fast I ran out of there. when it started flickering. I ran back into the living room and stood there for a bit trying to collect myself. It was then that I realized my cat was watching something in my bedroom from the top of the couch. I was about to say something to her when the TV shut off by itself. Before I could even react to that, the remote slid off the edge of the table and hit the floor. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. It was snowing way too hard outside, and leaving was not an option. Where the hell would I go in this weather? So, I ran back into the room, shut the water off in the bathroom, ran back out, shut the door, and then pushed the couch against the wall. I decided to go to bed early, thinking maybe if I'd ignored it, whatever was happening would stop. But of course, it didn't. Around 4 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps, not creaks or random noises a house could make, especially during a snowstorm. These were footsteps, clear as day, right behind my bedroom door. I just laid there, holding my breath, listening. I looked over to my cat and she was hunched down, staring at the door. The footsteps stopped, and then I heard 3 hard knocks on the door. I sat straight up and just stared at it. I turned the light on and walked towards the door, expecting it to open at any minute. When I reached it, I swung it open and jumped back. No one was there. I walked in and turned the light on and just looked around. Nothing was out of place, so I shut the light off again, closed the door, and went to get a drink of water. When I walked into the kitchen, I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw the attic hatch was open slightly. I swear to you, I never opened that thing. I've watched enough horror movies to know better. So I grabbed the broom and shut the hatch and went right back to the couch. I stayed awake until morning. I do believe in ghosts or poltergeists, and that's what scared me the most that night. I still hear little things from time to time, but nothing as intense as that night. I've also learned that if my cat doesn't react to it, then I probably have nothing to worry about. The last story for today deals with memories of visiting your grandparents' farm and the undeniable feeling of terror that you experience as a child, when you feel like no one takes you seriously until they too experience their own scares. But what happens when they never do, and you're left with memories that are better left alone? I've been thinking about this a lot lately after my grandmother died. When I was a kid, I absolutely hated going to my grandparents' farm. I never really knew why, but now that I'm older, I realized that there were things I experienced back then that I just didn't understand. Looking back, I think that house was haunted, and only I experienced it. The first thing I remember is the feeling I got when I was there. As soon as we'd pull into the driveway, my stomach would knot up. It felt like the house was watching me. I'd get this urge to stay close to the adults, but even that didn't help much because the feeling never really went away, no matter where I was in the house. The worst part of the house was the upstairs hallway. It was long, narrow, with creaky wooden floors, and for some odd reason, it always felt colder than the rest of the house. At the end of the hall was the room I'd have to sleep in whenever we stayed there. God, I hated that room. I'd beg my parents to let me sleep on the couch downstairs, but sadly, they never allowed me to. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway pacing back and forth. At first, I thought it was one of the adults, until I realized the steps never really stopped. They'd go on for hours, sometimes getting closer to the door, then fading away again. The floorboards would creak right outside my room, but when I finally got the courage to open the door, the hall would be empty. There was also this mirror at the end of the hall, just outside my grandparents' room. I don't know if it was the way the light hit it, but sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I would swear I saw someone standing behind me, a dark shape, just for a second. But when I turned around, there was never anyone there. I just started avoiding looking into the mirror altogether. One time, when I was about 10, I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard whispering. It sounded like two people talking softly right outside my door. I couldn't make out the words. It was too hushed, too fast. I remember just lying there, frozen. Eventually, the whispering stopped, and I must have fallen back to sleep. The next morning, I'd asked my grandma if she and grandpa had been talking in the hall, and she'd just give me this weird look and say, "No, we were asleep all night, honey." There were other things too, like objects moving around when no one was looking, faint knocking on the walls, doors creaking open on their own, and cold drafts in rooms where the windows were closed. But the adults always brushed it off as saying, "Old house noises, don't worry about it." After my grandparents passed away, my family sold the house and I never went back. But sometimes, when I think about it, I wonder if there was really something in that house, or was I just imagining it?